Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and we are doing a sustainability series during the month of April. So for this series, we have invited Susie Hewson, founder and CEO of Natracare, to join us today and tell us a little bit about her business and what they do to promote sustainability and to make us have more sustainable options for our menstrual care. So welcome, Susie. I'm so glad to have you here today. Thank you for joining us on this show. And I will have you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you and your business.
Thank you, Chloe. My name's Susie Hewson, as introduced. As you can probably tell, I'm British. But I sort of, my role is founder and developer, general horse rider of the company, product development for Natracare products, and a business that's quite unique in my way, in that it started as a campaign. So I'm a person who stumbled into being a business person and developing a product out of an environmental and health campaign.
So you said you stumbled into it. What was your background before you became a founder?
Oh my gosh. Well, as a young person, as a very, very young person, I always wanted to be a fashion designer. And my first week in art college in the fashion department told me that I did not want to be a fashion designer, but I love textiles. So I actually did my first degree in graphic design. So I was a graphic designer. I did a postgrad in education years later, having moved to Sweden and learnt to weave and learnt Swedish. I set up a franchise for a fitness company back in the 80s through the 90s. So I've been all sorts of things. But I guess what that teaches you, I suppose, is when you have to take on things that are outside of your normal working way or your comfort zone, that you learn skills that in one space may seem, when am I ever going to use this skill again? But I've used all my skills I've gained over those years. But at heart, I am still an artist. I tell myself when I have time.
And I do think that there's a natural progression maybe to, loving fashion and design and going into graphic design, because, a lot of that does coincide and probably really informed your work.
Yes, and I had a mentor. My aunt was my mentor. She was a fashion designer. But I think also that what I learned through the love of textiles is I also learned a great deal about synthetic textiles and the processes involved. So the chemistry of that and how invasive and how toxic those processes were for the environment and probably ultimately health. That also informed me. So I've kind of stayed in like the textile industry by default, which is maybe it was always my route.
Yeah. Well, it certainly led you to where you are today, so we are thankful for that. And it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I just wrote a piece and collaborated with a number of other people for issue 8, Beauty of More, called The Evolution of Secondhand, where I talk about how secondhand fashion is such a great way to also make sustainable choices, because one of the number one exports that goes into landfills, at least in America, is textiles. We throw away so many clothes and so many fabrics, and a lot of them are made with plastic. So those microplastics end up in our water supply. And every time we wash those clothes, if we buy them from fast fashion, that's going back into, our systems and our water. So yeah, it's just interesting how that all ties together.
Yeah, it's all about knowledge, isn't it? Ultimately, it's being informed, because it's very easy to blame a consumer, to blame an end user for, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you buying that? But unless you're informed, and it's very difficult to be informed on what contents, what the processes are that are involved, where sourcing of these products, and that the whole ethos around the fashion industry that does generate within us that need to be always changing or always modern. it contributes to all sorts of problems. So I'm actually glad to see, a generation that is, I mean, when I was very young, it was quite common for our parents to go to a jumble sale and come back. If they didn't come back with something that fit you, like a cardigan would be unpicked and reknitted, a dress would be sewn to fit you. So that has now come back as a sort of an admirable and positive, sustainable thing to do. So cycles of things where we know that it makes sense to do these things now.
Right. And the more that we talk about it and the more we encourage it, the more accessible it becomes for people to want to find those good pieces that are made well and tailor them to work to themselves. And, I think that you're doing something very similar with Natracare. So I would love to kind of get into that a little bit and talk about how you promote sustainability and eco-consciousness with what you're doing at Natracare.
Well, as I said, I started as a campaigner, so I've been an environmentalist for most of my, as you can imagine, people who go to art colleges become, at the forefront of learning and philosophizing and going into nature.
Yeah, you get radicalized. It just happens.
I'm radicalized environmentally, which has done me a lot of good. So I actually understood the principles and issues around environmental contamination. So because I came at it as solving a problem. So I lived in Canada for a year at the same time that Greenpeace were working on the campaign to stop the dumping of dioxin at sea. And what I saw when I lived in Sweden was the processes in the pulping industry that on my cycle to college each day, this reen was a different color. Why is this reen a different color? Because there's a pulping and a menstrual product manufacturing site there. There's pumping this stuff into the water. Mm-hmm. So there's two things of knowledge about what is good and bad for the environment and trying to campaign, if you like, against these things. What I realized from the work that I've worked on in the past environmentally and also in conservation is that you can protest, and protesting and having your voice heard is important. Mm-hmm. But in this sense, what I learned is that the menstrual hygiene industry was majorly polluting. It was detrimental to the environment, detrimental to our health, our personal health, though there's been no toxicological analysis of personal care products, which is what I think the Danielson Act is trying to address. Mm-hmm. But it means that I knew I had to put something in the market to show that it could be done in a better way. And I had no experience of how product development and stuff like that, but I had a very good design education. So I knew all the processes and protocols I needed to, I'd got to learn them very quickly. So it meant that in starting a business and designing products, sustainability was at the very core, the very heart. It was not going to be done if it could not be done in a sustainable and environmentally positive way. So unlike many businesses who with ESG are trying to make changes to their corporate operations and structures and practices through through ESG and maybe through B Corp or other similar protocols. Here in Europe, we have regulations and stuff that, changes are all the time, making businesses have to conform more. But I started from the other end. So it wasn't hardwired. It was hardwired into what I do. It wasn't something that I had to say, well, how are we going to do this sustainably? It was from the get-go. It was sustainable practices and sourcing raw materials. It's very odd for me to often when I'm talking about being a business person is I think I actually think, am I a business person? But I think, am I really a business person? Because I seem to be doing this, driving this environmental, challenging, climatic, social, agenda every day, and everyone seems to be getting along with it. So I just think I've just converted all these people to be, soft environmentalists in some respect.
Which is great. The more that we have that in business, the better off we're going to be. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So What does your team structure look like? You said you're the founder,
Mhm.
and you do a lot of like the writing for it. Do you have like a team of people around you?
We have a very small team. I mean, people often say, "Oh, gosh, you do all this with so few people." I think we're spread across. So I'm our company, our company. We're based in Britain, in Bristol, in the southwest of England, on the west coast, and there are about 20 of us here in the UK, and then we have 6 people in North America. Most of them are in Canada, because they're closer to us, with that big Atlantic Ocean. It's the
Mhm.
time difference that we have to work together.
Right.
Um, and and so we are a relatively small team. I've worked with contract manufacturers in Europe. One, two, three, four, and I've been working with the same contract manufacturers who develop my specifications for, I think the youngest, or I suppose the most recent, would have been at least 18 years. So
Wow.
anywhere between 18 and 33 years, we've been working with the same contract manufacturers, and I searched them out specifically. Well, some of it was because of my knowledge of being working in Sweden, but I also wanted to work with family-owned businesses, because
Yeah.
that whole concept of being a family, and we are a family business, we're not owned by investors or anything like that. So working with companies that were family based, were family owned, it was, I kind of, I know I've made people cry when I've been to visit suppliers, when I talk about the issue to do with plastic pollution or contamination of the environment or forest destruction or genetically modified, whatever. I have made them cry. Um, and some of that, it wasn't intentional to make them cry, but I could see there was empathy in what I was trying to do and what changes I was trying to bring into it, which also meant that by definition, what has happened is that my specifications and raw material requirements, the drive to be use sustainably sourced energy, so where all our processes is green energy, that came from pressure that I applied to those suppliers. So within the supply chain, they've come along on my journey because, one, I guess they recognize and empathize with what I was doing and built those practices into their own businesses. And that for me is also, that's also my role in as a campaigner, is in bringing other people along the sustainability route. That it's not just about, oh, I want to get this product and I can go and have it made in China. I mean, I can go, well, it'd be difficult to make my product any outside of what we do, but it is, you can source quick, cheap, maybe not so definitively monitored or sourced, but you can get things quick.
Mhm.
Um, but we've never gone along that route.
Yeah.
But equally, the business is its sustainability issues around environment and society and community, but we are still a profitable business. So it's proved the point that I set out, is that you can produce quality products, you can make a difference environmentally and to people's well-being, and do it as a business, do it profitably.
Yeah. Um, and there's not just the environmental and profit worries when you outsource, but there's the labor practices as well that probably weigh on your mind as well, and
Yeah,
hopefully on a lot of other people's minds. I think the more that we talk about it and the more we get it into the media, the more people prioritize fair labor practices. So that also kind of goes hand in hand, because sustainability is more than the environment. It's about human rights as well. So
absolutely. And
yeah.
I think, again, that's down to people. You don't need to climb trees or tie yourself to a bridge. Sometimes you probably do need to tie yourself to something, to make a point. But the power of the purse. Consumers have power. I can remember. I can't even. It was probably about oh gosh, it's probably at least 10 years or maybe more, maybe 12 or 15. I mean, time goes by. You know, COVID's kind of erased our minds, isn't it, on the what
Yes.
year is it? But I
Time is
remember
fake.
BC. We call it BC here. I was down in New York and I went into a store with my sister, and Teresa, my sister, is our SEO in Canada. And we were looking at clothes and we looking at labels, and I said, "There's no," because in Europe you have to state country of origin on everything. Unless you pack it in a European country, you have to state where the product is made, where it comes from. It's about practice and, you know, employment practice and best practice for your home workers too, because that's part of the concerns, I suppose, for every nation is that are our jobs going elsewhere when we
Right.
can do this, make these things ourselves. So I opened and I just said, look, these labels, they don't say where they're made. So I just grabbed an assistant and I was intentionally asking this question. I wasn't just being a nerd. And I said, could you tell me where this product is made? And the assistant had no idea. She says, oh, I don't know. She says, maybe we need to find out. And because I knew coming was this whole campaign about where does your stuff come from? And you can't make positive choices unless you have the full picture of where something is made, how it's made, what it's made from. Well, if you have a heart, and I think we hopefully as humans, our heart is very important to us, is that the money you take out of your purse can mean that you're contributing to best practice agriculture where the soil is regenerated and it sequesters carbon, we use less water, the people growing or sustaining agriculture get a good wage because they're producing something organic or forest managed. That makes a difference to that community. So the community reach from when you take that coin out of your purse, you're buying not just the thing that you're handing over the money for, but you're helping hopefully a beneficial supply chain, which means that the people that are producing the product, growing the product, are also getting a better life, a better deal for it. And that's important to me. And that should be important to all businesses who also want to let their consumers who are becoming more and more concerned. Their hearts are bulging. That is validated. We are validating what we say we do, and that's what Natracare has always done. It's no good just saying, yeah, of course, we aim to do that by 2050, but we might not. We validate exactly what we are doing now. That's important because we don't have a lot of time to make changes.
Scary.
So, the power of your purse. You don't have to be you don't have to be, I would encourage people, if there was ever an opportunity to go and speak to your political representative about what you really feel about, that's great. But I also know that what you pay for, the people you work for, will also have a huge impact very quickly on people's lives and the environment.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned community because community is very, very important to more. And, it goes to show that benefiting your local community is so important, but we can also have communities that extend across the ocean, all the way across the globe by doing interviews like this and talking to people with like minds. So we're going to conclude our Let's Talk More on Monday segment here. Please join us over on Patreon on our Save a Seat series. We're going to talk about what greenwashing means, the kind of the starting days of Natracare, how it began, and how we can make some more eco-conscious choices in our lives, especially when it comes to some of our health products. So make sure to go join us on Patreon, where you will hear more from me and Susie. And thank you so much for listening.